Chapter 1. The Unexpected Inheritance. Ethan Calloway's life was the kind of ordinary that could almost be forgotten in the grander tapestry of the universe. Nestled in a quiet town on Earth, he had spent 16 years living under the protective wings of his late grandmother, a woman who seemed to harbor more secrets than stories, and whose passing had left him with a strange legacy he could never have anticipated. On the surface, Ethan was just another teenager, awkward, thoughtful, and burdened by the weight of an unknown future. His days were filled with the usual trials of adolescent school, fleeting friendships, and dreams that stretched far beyond the boundaries of his small world. Yet nothing in those years had prepared him for the day when an encrypted message shattered his routine, summoning him to a destiny not of his choosing but writ across the stars. It began with the arrival of a peculiar device tucked away among his grandmother's belongings, an ancient hollow communicator, etched with alien symbols that seemed almost alive with a faint pulsating glow. It was unlike any technology Ethan had ever seen, a relic that whispered of civilizations far beyond Earth's reach. When he activated it, the screen flickered with a burst of static before stabilizing into a crisp transmission bearing a message in a language he couldn't understand. Moments later, an embedded translator rendered the words with chilling clarity. Ethan Calloway, rightful heir and bound partner of Kindra Valari, descendant of the Valari Dominion's ruling line. Your inheritance awaits on Valari Prime. The alliance forged through blood and honor demands your acceptance. The message was a summons, a decree from an alien empire spanning countless light years, an empire where political marriages were not just personal unions, but keystones of interstellar diplomacy and power. Ethan was stunned. He had never heard of Valari Prime or the Valari Dominion, nor did he comprehend the meaning of bound partner or inheritance in this cosmic context. Yet here it was, a claim on his very life, binding him irrevocably to a fate that would propel him into the depths of an alien culture steeped in tradition, strength, and ruthless politics. On the other side of the galaxy, Kindra Valari was no ordinary woman. To call her powerful would be an understatement. She was a warrior bred from bloodlines that had ruled for millennia, a leader of fearsome reputation whose mere presence could silence an entire war council. Her frame was statuesque, towering nearly 8 feet, with skin shimmering like burnished obsidian and eyes glowing with an unearthly violet fire. Every movement she made radiated authority and a lethal grace honed through countless battles. But beneath her calm, imperious exterior, a tempest of fury churned, fury born of betrayal and humiliation. She had been born into the cruel politics of her world, trained to dominate, to command legions, and to defend her people against threats both external and internal. Yet now, by the decree of her own family and the whims of an ancient treaty, she was being forced into a union with a human boy, a species she regarded as primitive and unworthy. To Kindra, this inheritance was not a blessing but a curse, a shackle that threatened to strip her of her autonomy and thrust her into a servitude she would never accept. The Valari Dominion's tradition of arranged alliances was ancient and unyielding, a relic of times when entire star systems clashed in endless wars for supremacy. Marriages were weapons, contracts sealed in blood and honor, designed to weave bonds stronger than treaties or fleets. But the notion of binding a boy barely out of childhood to a woman of such formidable power and experience was unprecedented and reckless. Kindra's Council of Elders, the shadowy figures who governed the finer threads of Valari politics, saw in Ethan a symbol of Earth's growing importance and potential as an ally. They expected her to bend, to submit, to help usher in a new era of cooperation. Yet they underestimated the indomitable spirit of their own warrior, who would rather die fighting than yield her will to one she considered a child. Back on Earth, Ethan's world was already unraveling. His small room, once a refuge of comfort and nostalgia, now felt like a cage tightening with the weight of unseen chains. Questions bombarded him relentlessly. Who was this Kindra? Why was he suddenly responsible for her? What did it mean to be bound to someone he had never met? His only link was the hollow communicator, through which came terse updates and commands from Valari envoys. They promised him protection, training, and an eventual meeting with Kindra herself, though they warned of her initial hostility. The human government, baffled yet intrigued, viewed Ethan as a potential key to intergalactic diplomacy, assigning agents and advisors to oversee his preparation. Yet none of this alleviated the crushing reality that his life had been irrevocably altered by forces beyond his comprehension. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself thrust into a whirlwind of preparation and cultural lessons. Specialists from Earth's fledgling space exploration program attempted to brief him on Volari customs, their language, and political structures, but the vast gulf between human and Volari worlds was staggering. The Volari were a race forged in fire and conquest, their society rigidly hierarchical, valuing strength and honor above all else. To Ethan, the idea of marrying into such a world felt surreal, almost like a nightmare scripted in a science fiction novel he had once read but never believed possible. Meanwhile, Kindra prepared herself in the cold, marble halls of Volari Prime's palace, her every thought focused on how to resist this forced union. She trained harder than ever, pushing her body to limits few dared to challenge, her mind a fortress of defiance and strategic calculation. The arrival of this human boy threatened to disrupt not only her life, but the delicate balance of power within the Dominion itself. As the day of departure drew near, a mixture of anticipation and dread filled Ethan's heart. He was to leave Earth behind and step into the unknown to meet Kindra, the alien woman he had inherited, a figure both awe-inspiring and terrifying. His dreams at night were haunted by visions of vast alien landscapes, towering starships, and eyes that burned with the promise of both danger and destiny. He wondered if he could live up to the expectations thrust upon him, or if he was doomed to be crushed beneath the weight of a cosmic legacy far beyond his years. For Kindra, the arrival of this human was the first challenge of a war she never chose to fight, a war between duty and freedom, power and submission. Neither knew that their meeting would ignite a chain of events that would shake not only their worlds but the entire galaxy, forcing them both to confront truths about themselves, their cultures, and the unyielding force that bound them together. In the silent depths of space, aboard a sleek starliner destined for Volari Prime, Ethan sat alone in the observation deck, staring into the abyss of stars. The distant lights twinkled coldly, indifferent to the turmoil unfolding within his heart. The weight of his inheritance pressed heavily upon him, a burden cloaked in mystery and danger. He did not know what awaited him on that distant alien world, nor the fierce will of the woman whose fate was now entwined with his own. But one thing was certain, his life was no longer his own. It belonged to a future written across the cosmos, where human and alien would be forced to forge a bond not by choice, but by decree and against the fierce currents of their own wills. As the starliner hummed through the void, Ethan's thoughts spiraled relentlessly. He fingered the fragile hollow communicator, the last tangible link to his old life, and the only proof that this was real. Despite the thorough briefings from Earth's diplomats and scientists, the reality of marrying an alien one so powerful and proud felt like a cruel joke of fate. He grappled with a surge of emotions, fear of the unknown, excitement tinged with disbelief, and a growing anxiety that he was utterly unprepared for the trials ahead. The human psyche was ill-equipped for such an abrupt leap from terrestrial obscurity to cosmic prominence, and Ethan felt the crushing weight of it all bear down on his adolescent shoulders. Meanwhile, Kindra paced in the grand chamber of her ancestral palace, the cool marble floors cold beneath her bare feet, her mind a tempest of rage and disbelief. She had once been the youngest to command a battalion in the Volari Dominion's feared war legions, praised for her unyielding spirit and unmatchable skill in combat. To be forcibly tied to a human child, one whose species she had been taught to see as primitive, vulnerable, and fragile, was an unbearable affront to everything she stood for. Every instinct screamed at her to reject the binding, to fight the arrangement with all the ferocity coursing through her veins. But the ancient treaty was ironclad, sealed long before either of their births, its threads woven into the fabric of galactic diplomacy. Her counsel warned her, resistance would not only isolate her, but could bring ruin upon her house and ignite political chaos across the Dominion. She was trapped between defiance and duty, and neither option promised freedom. The day Ethan arrived on Volari Prime was marked by an eerie stillness, the planet's sprawling capital a blend of towering crystalline spires and brutalist architecture that echoed the strength and ancient history of its people. Ethan stepped off the transport ship, his eyes wide with awe and trepidation, as Valari soldiers clad in gleaming armor saluted his presence. His arrival was not merely a personal milestone. It was a spectacle, a moment watched closely by leaders, diplomats, and spies alike. He was no longer just a boy from Earth. He was the living symbol of a fragile alliance between two vastly different worlds. But most of all, he was now bound to Kindra, whose presence would soon change everything. The first meeting between Ethan and Kindra was charged with tension so thick it seemed to choke the air itself. She entered the chamber like a tempest, her gaze icy and unyielding, sizing him up with a mixture of disdain and disbelief. Ethan felt smaller than ever under her towering frame and fierce eyes. She spoke with the weight of generations in her voice, a voice that brooked no opposition, yet beneath her words lay an undercurrent of reluctant acceptance. The rituals of bonding were ancient and complex, involving ceremonies and oaths that Ethan barely understood, but the meaning was clear. Their fates were entwined, whether they consented or not. As the ceremony progressed, Ethan struggled with the overwhelming sensations of alien energy, a bond forging between them that was as physical as it was spiritual, a link that neither could deny or break. The future was uncertain, but one truth was clear. Their lives were now irrevocably linked, a human boy and a powerful alien warrior bound by destiny against her will. Chapter 2: The Clash of Worlds. The days following the binding ceremony were a tempest of conflicting emotions and cultural clashes. Ethan was whisked away into a rigorous regime of training and education designed to prepare him for life as Kindra's consort and co-ruler, a role fraught with peril and steeped in political intrigue. Valari culture was brutal and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the relative simplicity of Earth life. Every lesson emphasized strength, strategy, and the art of negotiation in a galaxy where betrayal lurked behind every alliance. Ethan's teachers were stern, their expectations impossibly high for a mere human, and he often found himself overwhelmed by the rapid pace and sheer magnitude of what he was expected to learn. Yet even as he struggled, there was a quiet determination growing within him, a budding resolve to rise to the challenge, not just for himself, but for the fragile hope of unity between their worlds. Kindra, meanwhile, maintained a cold distance, her demeanor a fortress against the vulnerability that this forced union threatened to expose. She tolerated Ethan's presence as a necessity, a burden to be borne with stoic grace. Her days were filled with council meetings, training sessions, and constant vigilance against threats both external and internal. Yet beneath the hardened exterior, a subtle shift began, a flicker of curiosity about the boy who was not like any alien she had ever encountered. Ethan's humanity, with its flaws and frailties, also held sparks of something unfamiliar: empathy, hope, and resilience born from a world vastly different, yet unexpectedly rich in spirit. It was a quiet tension, a dance of clashing worlds, where suspicion met wonder and disdain met reluctant respect. Their interactions were often fraught with misunderstandings. Kindra's commanding presence and unyielding expectations clashed with Ethan's inexperience and tentative nature. She demanded strength and confidence. He offered uncertainty and humility. Yet over time, these clashes became opportunities, moments where each learned from the other, where barriers cracked and new bridges were built. Ethan began to understand the weight of Kindra's burdens, and she, in turn, glimpsed the potential buried within his youthful spirit. Together, they navigated the complex rituals, the rigid hierarchies, and the unspoken dangers of Valari politics, delicate balance of power, pride, and survival. But the path ahead was anything but smooth. Whispers of dissent echoed through the halls of the Dominion, factions that saw Ethan as a threat, a weak link to be exploited or eliminated. Kindra faced pressure from her council to sever ties, to reject the bond and uphold Valari tradition above all. For Ethan, every day was a test of courage and wit, a struggle to prove himself worthy not only of Kindra's respect, but of the trust of an entire civilization. Theirs was a union born of necessity, forged in fire and resistance, a collision of two souls trapped in a destiny neither chose. Yet within this crucible of conflict and uncertainty, the seeds of something profound and transformative were quietly taking root, a story that would redefine the meaning of power, loyalty, and love across the stars. In the weeks that followed their initial meeting, the reality of their bond settled over Ethan and Kindra like a thick fog, unavoidable, suffocating, yet charged with an undeniable intensity. Ethan found himself immersed in a world that tested every fiber of his being. The Valari training grounds were unlike any earthly experience. Vast arenas filled with towering statues of ancient heroes, their faces frozen in eternal defiance, rings of blazing energy fields that tested endurance, and relentless drills that pushed body and mind to the brink. His instructors were veteran warriors, scarred, hardened, and unyielding, who regarded Ethan's human fragility with thinly veiled disdain. Yet beneath their stern gazes, there was an undercurrent of cautious hope. If this boy could survive even a fraction of their demands, he might just become more than a political pawn. Ethan grappled with physical exhaustion and mental overload, his muscles screaming from unfamiliar exertion, his mind struggling to grasp complex Valari strategies and customs that had been ingrained in their culture for millennia. Kindra, for her part, watched his struggles with a guarded gaze. Her heart was a fortress she had built stone by stone, yet she couldn't ignore the strange stirrings that accompanied Ethan's tenacity. Here was a human who, despite every obstacle, refused to break, a trait she recognized as essential, even admirable. Still, her pride and ingrained skepticism kept her aloof. She demanded perfection from herself and expected it from those around her, and Ethan was a long way from meeting those standards. Their exchanges were terse and charged, laced with frustration and unspoken challenges. She trained him not only in combat techniques, but in the subtleties of Valari etiquette, diplomacy, and the deadly art of reading enemies hidden beneath polished smiles. She pushed him harder than any soldier, determined to mold him into a partner worthy of standing beside her, whether he liked it or not. But the clash extended beyond their personal dynamic into the turbulent political landscape of Valari Prime. The ruling council was fractured, with factions vying for influence and power, each viewing Ethan through their own lens of suspicion or opportunity. Some saw him as a naive figurehead, a weak link to be manipulated in their machinations. Others recognized the unique chance to use the alliance with Earth as leverage to strengthen the Dominion's reach. Murmurs in shadowed corridors spoke of plots to undermine the boy and discredit Kindra's decision to accept the binding. Rumors whispered that there were those who wished to sever the alliance altogether, to preserve Valari purity and power without human interference. For Kindra, the pressure was immense. She was caught between loyalty to her people and an unexpected, growing attachment to Ethan, a complicated web of duty, defiance, and an unacknowledged yearning for something beyond power and politics. Ethan, meanwhile, struggled with isolation and self-doubt. Despite his growing strength, he felt out of place in this alien world, haunted by memories of his old life on Earth, its simple joys, its comforts, and the friends and family he had left behind. The cultural gulf was vast. The Valari regarded emotions like compassion or mercy as weaknesses, while Ethan's empathy was a core part of who he was. Their worlds seemed irreconcilable. Yet amid the alien rituals and relentless expectations, he found small moments of connection with Kindra, not through words, which were often clipped and formal, but through shared glances in the heat of battle training, through mutual respect earned in silence, and the quiet understanding of two souls thrust into a union neither had desired. One evening, after a grueling day of drills and council meetings, Ethan found himself alone in the palace's vast gardens, in otherworldly expanse of luminescent plants and softly glowing pathways that shimmered under twin moons. It was a rare sanctuary from the constant scrutiny, a place where he could breathe and think. To his surprise, Kindra appeared beside him, her presence commanding yet unexpectedly gentle. She spoke then, her voice low and measured, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability beneath her fierce exterior. She admitted her doubts, her fears about the binding, and her own struggles to reconcile her identity as a warrior with the role fate had imposed upon her. Ethan listened, his heart stirring with empathy and resolve. In that moment, the barriers between them softened, not erased, but transformed into a tentative bridge built on honesty and shared uncertainty. Their alliance was fragile, a delicate balance of power, will, and emerging trust. Each was learning to navigate not only the politics of Valari Prime, but the complexities of their intertwined destinies. They were bound by ancient law and cosmic chance, forced to find common ground in a universe that seemed determined to keep them apart. Yet in this crucible of clash and compromise, something unexpected began to take root. A bond forged not only in duty, but in the quiet resilience of two very different beings learning to stand together against the stars. As the weeks passed, the uneasy truce between Ethan and Kindra gradually evolved. The once palpable walls of mistrust and resentment began to show faint cracks, worn down by shared hardships and silent acknowledgments of each other's strengths. Ethan's persistence in learning Valari combat forms and customs did not go unnoticed. His human instincts, unrefined and raw compared to the centuries-old techniques of the Valari, offered a different perspective on problem-solving and strategy, one that sometimes caught even Kindra off guard. His ability to adapt, to question without fear, became a quiet source of fascination. Kindra, too, began to reveal flashes of warmth beneath her imposing armor. Moments when her guarded expression softened, when a rare smile flickered in her violet eyes, told Ethan that beneath the warrior's pride was a soul struggling with loneliness and the weight of expectations. Yet, their progress was shadowed by the ever-present storm of political intrigue. The ruling council's factions grew bolder, weaving webs of deceit aimed at breaking their union or using it for personal gain. Assassination attempts disguised as accidents, secret meetings with hostile alien emissaries, and whispers of rebellion reached their ears with increasing frequency. Kylindra's position as the Dominion's chosen warrior was challenged by ambitious rivals who saw the alliance with a human as a threat to Valari purity. Ethan found himself thrust into a world where diplomacy was as dangerous as battle, where every word spoken or withheld could tip the balance between peace and war. Despite his youth and inexperience, he learned to hold his own in these shadowy arenas, sometimes surprising even his hardened alien counterparts with his calm resolve and unexpected insight. Their relationship, once defined by forced proximity and reluctant cooperation, began to deepen into something neither had anticipated. It was not love, at least not yet, but a growing respect born from shared struggle and mutual protection. Kindra defended Ethan fiercely in council debates, while Ethan stood by her side in training and strategy sessions, earning the grudging admiration of Valari elites. Each saw in the other a kindred spirit battling against the chains of fate, a partner whose strengths complemented their own weaknesses. But beneath these fragile bonds simmered the question that neither dared voice openly. Could they overcome not only their differences, but the powerful forces arrayed against them to forge a future together? One night, beneath the twin moons of Valari Prime, Kindra led Ethan to a secluded cliff overlooking the sprawling cityscape below. The stars blazed cold and distant, but in that moment, the vastness of the universe seemed to shrink around them. Kindra spoke softly, her voice laced with vulnerability rare for someone so formidable. She confessed her fears not only of losing her status and autonomy, but of what her heart might become tangled in this unnatural union. Ethan listened, feeling the fragile threads of trust tighten between them. The path ahead was fraught with danger, uncertainty, and sacrifice, but for the first time, they faced it not as adversaries, but as reluctant allies bound by more than law, a connection forged in the crucible of survival and growing understanding. Chapter 3: Shadows of Rebellion. The fragile alliance between Ethan and Kindra was soon tested by the rising tide of rebellion. Whispered dissent in the corridors of power escalated into open challenges against the Dominion's leadership. Groups loyal to Valari tradition rejected the presence of a human in their midst and viewed the binding as a betrayal of their sacred customs. Secret factions began to plot actively against Ethan, aiming to undermine his influence and sever the union by any means necessary. Kindra, caught between loyalty to her people and a newfound bond with Ethan, faced mounting pressure to suppress these uprisings with force. Yet the complexities of their situation demanded more than brute strength. The rebellion was as much ideological as it was political, fueled by fear, prejudice, and the unwillingness to accept change. Ethan found himself thrust into the heart of this storm, forced to navigate treacherous alliances and unseen enemies. His human perspective, sometimes naive, often compassionate, clashed with the ruthless pragmatism of Volari politics. But it also became his greatest asset. While others wielded power through intimidation and ancient bloodlines, Ethan sought unity through dialogue, understanding, and the slow building of trust among disparate factions. His efforts were met with skepticism and hostility, yet also with surprising support from those weary of endless conflict. Slowly, a coalition of moderates emerged, people who saw in the human-alien bond not a weakness but a chance for a new future. Meanwhile, Kindra balanced the demands of a warrior and leader. Her skills in combat remained unmatched, and she used them to quell outbreaks of violence while protecting Ethan from assassination attempts and political traps. The two grew inseparable, their partnership evolving into a formidable force that commanded respect across the Dominion. Yet, in quiet moments, both wrestled with personal doubts and the sacrifices their bond required. Kindra wondered if her fierce independence could survive the compromises of alliance and love. Ethan questioned whether he could truly live up to the role destiny had thrust upon him, a human boy standing against centuries of tradition and hostility, fighting not only for survival, but for acceptance in a world alien and dangerous. As shadows lengthened over Volari Prime, the rebellion's flames threatened to engulf everything. Ethan and Kindra faced their greatest challenge yet, to unite a fractured people and bridge the vast gulf between their worlds before it was too late. Their journey was no longer just about survival, it was about transformation, redemption, and the possibility that even the most unlikely of bonds could reshape the fate of galaxies. The undercurrents of dissent roared beneath the surface of Volari Prime like a tidal wave poised to crash. The rebellion was no longer just a whisper of discontent, but a coordinated force fueled by centuries of distrust and fear of the unknown. Ethan quickly learned that beneath the veneer of Volari decorum lurked a brutal reality where power was often taken, not given, and loyalty was as fickle as the shifting stars above. The factions opposed to his presence were ruthless, employing spies, assassins, and agitators who infiltrated even the most sacred halls of the Dominion's leadership. Their goal was clear: to fracture the alliance by breaking the bond between him and Kindra, to restore what they considered the purity of Volari tradition by purging the foreign element threatening their lineage. Ethan, despite being out of his depth in this alien war of shadows and subterfuge, refused to back down. His youthful determination became a beacon for those who, like him, sought a new path beyond the prejudices and rigid hierarchies of the past. Drawing on the empathy and ideals instilled in him on Earth, Ethan sought to build bridges among the fractured factions not through fear or force, but through dialogue, shared purpose, and the slow dismantling of ancient barriers. Yet, every meeting carried risk. Ambushes disguised as diplomatic talks, betrayal by trusted advisors, and constant surveillance meant that even a single misplaced word could mean death or exile. Still, Ethan persevered, learning quickly to navigate the labyrinthine politics of Volari Prime with the tenacity of a survivor and the idealism of a dreamer. Kindra's role in this turbulent time was both protector and warrior. Her combat prowess was legendary, and she used it to quash violent uprisings swiftly. But her true challenge lay in balancing the expectations of her people with the unpredictable heart of the human to whom she was bound. Watching Ethan endure these trials ignited a fierce loyalty within her, one that transcended the political necessity of their bond. She began to see in him a partner worthy not just of alliance, but of respect and perhaps something deeper. Their moments of shared strategy and silent understanding amidst chaos forged a connection that neither duty nor defiance could easily sever. Yet, Kindra remained acutely aware of the fragile line they walked. The Dominion's future hinged not only on their union, but on their ability to withstand the relentless storm gathering around them. The rebellion's leaders grew bolder, staging a series of calculated strikes designed to destabilize the Dominion's core. Key allies were assassinated, supply routes sabotaged, and propaganda spread to inflame the populace against the human interloper. In response, Ethan and Kindra intensified their efforts, rallying moderate factions and leveraging their combined strengths. His innovative strategies, born from Earth's more egalitarian ideals and her fierce authority steeped in Volari tradition. Their joint leadership became a symbol of hope and defiance, inspiring those weary of endless conflict to envision a future where diversity was a strength rather than a threat. But the cost was high. Trust was a precious commodity, and every alliance formed was shadowed by suspicion. Ethan grappled with the constant fear of betrayal, the weight of expectation, and the gnawing uncertainty of whether he was truly capable of leading in this alien world. Kindra, for all her power, wrestled with her own doubts whether her heart could ever reconcile the fierce independence of a warrior with the vulnerability demanded by their bond. Together, they faced not only external enemies but the internal battles of identity, loyalty, and the sacrifices demanded by love and duty. As the rebellion's flames threatened to consume Volari Prime, Ethan and Kindra stood united, a formidable force forged in the crucible of conflict and growing trust. Their journey was far from over. The shadows of rebellion cast long and dark, but within their union flickered the possibility of a new dawn, one born not from conquest or fear, but from understanding, resilience, and the transformative power of an unlikely bond between a human boy and a powerful alien warrior. The rebellion's crescendo came not with thunderous battle cries, but in whispered betrayals and hidden daggers. One evening, as the twin moons cast long shadows over the Dominion's capital, a carefully orchestrated coup attempt rippled through the corridors of power. Ethan and Kindra found themselves trapped in the heart of a palace besieged by forces that once wore the guise of allies. The air grew thick with tension, the threat of death lurking behind every closed door and beneath every smile. They moved like shadows themselves, silent, cautious, yet unyielding as they fought to unravel the conspiracy threatening to rend their fragile alliance apart. In the midst of chaos, Ethan's growth became undeniable. His instincts sharpened, his voice steadied, and his strategic mind outmaneuvered foes both seen and unseen. Kindra, ever the fierce warrior, fought with the deadly grace of a tempest, her every strike a testament to the legacy she bore. Together, they orchestrated a defense not just of their lives, but of the future of their people, a future precariously balanced on the edge of an ancient sword and the hope of a new era. As dawn broke, the conspirators were defeated, their plots laid bare before the council and the people. Yet victory came at a cost. Trust had been shattered, alliances tested, and the scars of rebellion etched deep into the soul of the Dominion. For Ethan and Kindra, the battle forged an unbreakable bond tempered by fire and trust, a bond that transcended political necessity and edged towards something profoundly human. Companionship born of shared struggle and hope. Chapter 4. A New Dawn and the Promise of Tomorrow. The days that followed were a mixture of rebuilding and reflection. Volari Prime bore the wounds of rebellion, streets once vibrant now scarred by conflict, and the weight of uncertainty hung heavy in the air. But amid the ruins, a new spirit began to take hold, one inspired by the unlikely union of human and Volari warrior. Ethan and Kindra stood side by side before the gathered leaders and citizens, their presence a living symbol of change and resilience. They spoke not as conquerors, but as partners united by choice and conviction, pledging to heal the fractures of the past and forge a future where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Their alliance transformed Volari society, challenging centuries of tradition and inspiring a movement toward openness and cooperation. Ethan's perspective introduced new ideas of equality and empathy, while Kindra's strength and wisdom anchored these ideals in the realities of governance and survival. Together, they navigated the delicate balance of reform and respect for heritage, slowly reshaping the Dominion into a place where old wounds could heal and new possibilities could flourish. Yet even as they looked forward, challenges remained. The galaxy beyond Volari Prime watched closely, some with hope, others with suspicion and envy. Their bond was more than a personal journey, it was a beacon and a battleground for forces that would seek either to embrace or destroy the promise of unity they represented. For Ethan and Kalindra, the road ahead was uncertain, but filled with the profound possibility that love, forged in the crucible of conflict and choice, could transcend the vast divides of space, culture, and destiny. As the twin suns rose over the horizon, bathing Valari Prime in golden light, Ethan and Kalindra stood together, ready to face whatever the universe might bring. Their story, one of inheritance against will, of rebellion and reconciliation, was far from over. It was, in truth, just beginning. The aftermath of the rebellion was a crucible in which the future of Valari Prime and indeed the fate of two worlds was to be forged anew. The wounds left by strife ran deep, both in the city's battered walls and in the hearts of its people. Yet within those wounds lay the seeds of unprecedented change. Ethan and Kalindra had become more than reluctant partners. They were the embodiment of a fragile hope that defied the cynicism and prejudice ingrained in centuries of tradition. Standing together, they faced a society reluctant to heal, divided between those clinging fiercely to old ways and those daring to dream of a future where the human and the Valari might walk side by side, not as conqueror and subject, but as equals and allies. Ethan's journey from an uncertain boy to a figure of influence was both extraordinary and fraught. He had learned to speak the language not only of words but of power, respect, and subtlety in a culture vastly different from his own. The ideals he brought from Earth of empathy, cooperation, and the belief that strength could come from unity rather than domination began to resonate, especially among the younger generation of Valari. Kalindra, whose very existence was bound to the weight of ancient honor and fierce independence, found herself transformed as well. Her walls of pride and defiance softened as she witnessed firsthand the courage it took for Ethan to stand unwavering in the face of overwhelming odds and cultural opposition. Together, they began to envision a society reshaped by the strengths of both their peoples, where the warriors might complemented the humans' compassion. Yet the path to this new dawn was neither straight nor certain. The scars of rebellion lingered, and dissenting voices still whispered in the shadows, unwilling to surrender the old hierarchies and prejudices. The Dominion's Council, once fractured by infighting, began to coalesce around the idea that survival required evolution. Reforms were proposed, some modest, others revolutionary, that challenged age-old caste structures and promoted inclusion. These changes were met with fierce debate, often erupting into heated confrontations that tested the fragile bonds holding the Dominion together. Ethan and Kalindra stood at the center of these storms, their unity a stabilizing force that inspired confidence even as it provoked resistance. Beyond Valari Prime, the galaxy watched with bated breath. Some systems welcomed the alliance as a beacon of hope for peace and cooperation in a fractious universe. Others regarded it with suspicion, fearful that this unprecedented union might upset the delicate balance of power or inspire revolts within their own realms. Ambassadors arrived, tentative negotiations began, and fleets repositioned as the Dominion and Earth prepared to take their place on the galactic stage as partners. For Ethan and Kalindra, this was not just a political victory, but a personal one, a testament to the resilience of their bond and the promise it held. In quieter moments, away from the eyes of the court and the expectations of empires, Ethan and Kalindra allowed themselves to envision a different kind of future, one where their union was not merely a political contract but a foundation for genuine connection. They learned to trust in each other's strengths and vulnerabilities, their differences becoming sources of growth rather than conflict. The journey from resentment and resistance to respect and affection was neither swift nor easy, but it was real. In the vastness of space and the complexity of their worlds, they had found a rare and precious thing, partnership born not of obligation alone but of choice. As Valari Prime's twin suns rose on a new day, casting golden light across a planet scarred but hopeful, Ethan and Kalindra stood together on the palace balcony. Looking out over the city, they now had the power and the responsibility to guide. The challenges ahead were many, but so were the possibilities. Their story was far from finished. It was a beginning, an unfolding saga of courage, transformation, and the enduring power of unity in the face of the cosmos' vast, unyielding expanse. The months that followed the rebellion were a relentless test of endurance, wisdom, and the fragile art of leadership. Ethan and Kindra found themselves not only ruling a planet, but embodying the very ideals they wished to instill: courage in the face of uncertainty, openness in a world built on tradition, and hope where despair once reigned. Their partnership grew stronger, shaped by shared trials and tempered by the weight of responsibility. They met opposition at every turn, from hardened council members resistant to change, from factions that saw their union as an abomination, and from neighboring systems wary of what such an unprecedented alliance might mean for the balance of power. But they faced it all together, their combined will unyielding. Kindra's transformation was perhaps the most profound. The fierce warrior who once viewed Ethan as a child unworthy of her time had come to see him as an equal, a partner whose compassion balanced her strength, whose curiosity challenged her to see beyond the cold certainties of her world. In the quiet moments away from public eyes, their conversations grew deeper, their silences more comfortable. They shared memories, fears, and dreams not as bound partners, but as two souls choosing to walk the same path. The icy walls around Kindra's heart thawed beneath the warmth of trust and companionship, a change that surprised even herself. Ethan, for his part, matured beyond his years. The boy who had once felt overwhelmed by the vastness of alien politics and the burden of unexpected inheritance blossomed into a leader respected across Valari Prime and beyond. His humanity, the empathy, hope, and idealism that some had mocked became a guiding light, inspiring a new generation to believe in the possibility of unity amidst diversity. He learned to wield power not as a weapon but as a tool for healing, bridging gaps that had seemed insurmountable. The lessons from Earth combined with the wisdom of Valari tradition forged a new path forward, one where strength was measured not just in force but in the courage to change. The culmination of their efforts was marked by a grand convocation of the Dominion's leaders and representatives from allied worlds. It was here, beneath the vast dome of the Crystal Hall, that Ethan and Kindra unveiled their vision for a united future, a future where alliances were built on mutual respect and shared destiny rather than fear and dominance. Their speeches, delivered with conviction and heartfelt sincerity, echoed through the halls and into the hearts of all present. The assembly, once fractured and hostile, responded with cautious optimism, signaling a turning point that would ripple throughout the galaxy. Yet, the true victory lay not in political treaties or speeches, but in the quiet moments between two people bound by fate and choice. Standing together under Valari Prime's twin suns, Ethan and Kindra faced a horizon filled with challenges, yet bright with promise. Their journey from inheritance against her will to partners by heart was a testament to the power of resilience, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but they would face it united, their story a beacon for those who dared to believe that even the most unlikely bonds could change the course of history. And so, the human boy who inherited a powerful alien wife against her will become a legend not just as a ruler or warrior, but as a symbol of hope, bridging worlds and hearts in an endless universe.